If you make the claim that everyone who says that they believe in Jesus actually believes in Jesus, then I see only two possible options. One is that you are just kind of blissfully ignorant, and two, that you intentionally want to pretend that is the case. See, there's people who claim that they are Protestant or Christian, and they're saying that they do worship the same God as Roman Catholics. But the Roman Catholics say that they worship the same God as the Muslims. And the Muslims, in the Quran, it says very clearly that if you believe that Jesus is God, then you're going to hell. Then you have the Mormons who believe that Jesus was not the eternal God, that their God was once a man on another planet who became a God, and then Jesus also became a God, but Jesus was created first in the spiritual realm, in like heaven essentially, by Elohim having a happy time with one of his many goddess wives, and then ultimately, according to Brigham Young's, that God had to physically have intercourse with Mary to create Jesus on earth. That in and of itself right there is a false Jesus. They declare that Jesus was born in a place that is separate from where he was born. They claim he was born at Jerusalem instead of Bethlehem, and that is a false Jesus. If you have one single thing that is wrong when it comes to God, then that is going to create a fake God. Buddhists claim that they believe in Jesus. They believe that he was another Buddha. Hindus believe that Jesus is one of their 30 million gods. But the Bible teaches very clear things about Jesus. And this is where you really have to understand why Sola Scriptura is actually an important thing. Because we need to test everything according to the Bible, because if something contradicts the Bible or goes against the Bible, we have to declare that thing to be untrue because it is in opposition to something that we know is true. So for Roman Catholicism, as I've gone into this many times, if you have one single attribute of God that you take away from God, that you apply to another person that makes it no longer a unique attribute of God, or if you change any aspect of God, you, just like in any other case, have created a false God. And in the case of Roman Catholicism, Mormonism, and so many others, they are blasphemously calling their false God by the name Jesus. So take, for example, the fact that God is sinless. Jesus said there is no one good but God alone. 2 Corinthians 5:21 declares that Jesus is in fact sinless, so that means that Jesus is God. That God made him who knew no sin to be sin for us, that we might become the righteousness of God in him. Romans 3 says that there is no one who does good, no, not even one, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. But the Catholic Church says, no, that verse is wrong because there is one. There is Mary. The Catholic Church claims that they have infallibly interpreted Luke 1:28 to imply that Mary was sinless. This by those traits, where the Bible referring to Jesus as sinless is an indication of him being God, that not only removes that unique attribute away from Jesus exclusively, but it applies to Mary, which is then calling Mary God. Catholics don't realize how severe it is to make this claim, because not only have they created a goddess, one who can be prayed to, one who can pray for you while being dead, one who can tell God what to do. That changes who God is. And if you change who God is, you create a false God. And even if you call that false God by the name Jesus, it doesn't change anything. If you called me Natalie, does that somehow make me Natalie? If you called me Donald Trump, did I suddenly become Trump? Not even a little. See, in Deuteronomy 32, Psalm 106, and 1 Corinthians 10, it explains that if you have a false god, then you are worshiping a demon. You are worshiping ultimately Satan, because every demon is under Satan. This is the danger that lies in that. This is why I so desperately try to express to Catholics that they have a false god. Same reason I try to express to Mormons that they have a false god. Because Jesus said you're either with me or against me. There's no in-between, there's no kind of there with Jesus. You're either worshiping Jesus or you're worshiping Satan. There is no in-between. Every atheist, they are committing autolatry, which is self-worship. That is a form of self-idolatry, which is devil worship. Everything is exclusively that you worship God or you worship Satan. There is nothing else in this world that you can be worshiping. There are not a plethora of different gods. There is only the real God and only Satan as the other option. So if you change attributes of the real God and you create for yourself a false God, that means that you do not have a real God. You do not have anything close to the real Jesus. That means that you are worshiping Satan even though you're not intentionally doing it. Very few people who actually worship Satan are aware that they're worshiping Satan. They don't understand this very important truth, and as a result of that, they are unfortunately being deceived and led astray. They're following after false gods, strange gods that they had not known. These are demons. And so even when you call that demon by the name Jesus blasphemously, that doesn't change the fact that you are not worshiping Jesus. You're worshiping Satan disguised as Jesus. And so if I were to pretend, knowing the truth, pretend that Catholics are in communion with me, to pretend that Mormons are worshiping the same God as me, to pretend Muslims are worshiping the same God, if I were to do that while knowing the truth, and if I were to sit there telling them like, yeah, you worship the same God, you're probably fine, I know in my heart that to be a lie, and I will not do that. How much do I have to actually hate a person to know the truth and just sit there and let them believe a lie? That for the sake of making people feel happy, how much do I have to hate them in order for me to not tell them the truth? This is the issue that a lot of people have online, seeing just little clips and things taken out of context, but I can guarantee you that I love Catholics more than any Catholic loves each other. I'm willing to tell them the really painful truth because I love them and I want them to know the real Jesus. And I'm not going to pretend that they are in communion with me. They deny the gospel. They deny the God of the Bible. They worship their church as God, putting the church equal to the Bible, putting the church equal to the actual words of God. And I just simply cannot pretend because I love them far too much to do that. After filming this video and before posting this video, Mike from True Christian Ministry reached out to me, and he's been getting some questions because of the events that have been taking place involving me and the stance that I took against Catholicism. And so he reached out to me doing what a good brother in Christ would do, and he wanted to confirm things. He wanted to push me on some things, and it was very good. So I wanted to make sure I clarify this for everybody. When I am saying that Catholicism has a false god and that false god is Satan, I'm not saying that every single Catholic worships Satan. There are many Catholics who have no idea whatsoever of what Catholicism actually teaches. But those who genuinely follow Catholicism, those ones do in fact worship a false god, and therefore they worship a demon, therefore they worship Satan. So, just to make that very, very abundantly clear, there are going to be so many people inside of what is considered Catholicism who absolutely don't understand what the Catholic Church teaches as a gospel, and therefore they could unintentionally, in spite of what Rome teaches, actually be following the real Jesus Christ. And so I think that there are going to be many Catholics who are genuinely Christian in spite of what their church teaches. I've expressed this dozens of times in numerous videos, but I wanted to make sure that I reiterate it one more time. I don't say that all Catholics worship Satan, but any Catholics who actually truly follow the fake god of Catholicism, I would say that they in fact do have a false god. And according to the Bible, every false god is a demon, and every demon is under Satan.